Thanks everyone for hanging out to the DEMA Visiting Artist Series. Just a quick description or plug for DEMA. If you don't know what DEMA is, it's a program that started on campus in fall of last year, and it's basically a collaboration between the Department of Computer Science, the Department of Art, and Communication and Media Arts. And certainly we're looking to bridge the gap between those three areas and to basically provide students with an interdisciplinary learning experience where you have the option to kind of mesh those three or create a hybrid form of curriculum for yourself. So if you have any interest in the program, I have flyers up here, or definitely look me up, contact me. My name's Paul Echeverria, and I'm in Higgins Annex 108, and I'd be happy to give you more information about the program. Part of that program is also reaching out to artists and inviting them onto campus so they have an opportunity to share their experiences with us as a student population, as prospective artists and media creators. And today I want to introduce Sebastian Bardan Greenberg, aka Siva Jiva. The way I want to introduce Siva is he is originally a hip hop artist and has gradually gotten into curation. And the show he created is called Hip Hop Unage d'Or, which is currently on display at the Contemporary Art Museum in Marseille. The thing that I want to do is just take you back a couple decades, if you will, and I want to kind of frame it with my own experience, where I myself was an undergrad and attending a concert, a hip hop concert at our campus at Purchase College, where we were classmates. And I was there watching, kind of having this experience, kind of expecting this interesting show, and Sebastian's group came out, Get Open, and they were performing. And then this hip hop artist named KRS-One, which the younger crowd, I don't know how many of you know KRS-One, but by a show of hands, any KRS-One people? Okay. So KRS-One came out and started rapping side by side with Siva, and he actually wished Siva a happy birthday. And you know, my mind was blown at that time. I was like, wow, how incredible is this, that this artist who is a fundamental pioneer of hip hop comes to our campus, sings alongside one of our students, right, and hip hop artists, and it is able to kind of build that collaboration. And I see Siva's work is passing that forward in a way, right? That artists are not only responsible for building their own bodies of work, but also for creating archives, having discussions about history and theory as it relates to the medium. So that's one of the things that we stress in DEMA, is that we not only have a responsibility to be artists, but to also be curators, to be archivists, to basically create collections that we then move forward and share with others. And so on that note, I'll let him talk a little bit about his collection and how he basically built or curated this show. And then once he finishes his presentation, we'll open it up for questions and go from there. So let's give him a warm welcome. This is Sebastian Bardan.
Hello, everybody. Can you guys all hear me in the back? Well, I'm glad I got 4 that know KRS-One. It could have been 0, right? And come on, y'all, that's only 20 years ago. I mean, only if you were digging to 1910, I could understand. Like, but, if there's no KRS-One, there's no Kanye, there's no 21 Savage, there's no Young Thug. You name them all, there's none of these guys if KRS is not there. But let's not concentrate on KRS. He'll be part of the conversation. So, as Paul said, we met each other in college. And my college experience was pretty special because I'm originally from France. And I lived 20 years in Paris. Il y a des Français qui parlent pas français? Non, pas de français? 0? Okay, c'est pas rien. Well, got less response than KRS. That's cool. So my whole, I'm an immigrant, right? I came when I was young, lived in the Lower East Side. I'm just trying to give you a background of why this happened, because this wasn't planned. This has just happened, right? So basically, born in France, I come here to attend LaGuardia High School, Performing Art High School. Anybody familiar with that in New York City? Music and art. Anybody saw the movie Fame? There was also a great series. If you didn't see Fame, and you guys are in this arts program, you have to see Fame. You have to see that movie. Great movie, very inspiring for a young artist. And that was the inspiration for my mom to be like, son, I want you to go to this school. And I'm lucky because I had a father who was a New Yorker. So I was able to come here and I tried to get in for drums. And I did, and that opened up my world to hip hop. Because in France, when I came from, in 1984, there was no hip hop. There's very little, right? Because we didn't have the internet. You guys gotta think about that every time you look for information. We couldn't get the information like that. We didn't have Google. So we had to search, right? So always the question is, how did hip hop ever get to Europe? Right? Because you might think, and if you guys all into the culture a little bit, even if you're not into hip hop can't be denied today. It's a global culture. It's invaded every country you can name. 196 countries in the world, they've all been invaded by hip hop. You ask the young kids in Palestine what they listen to? Hip hop. They're listening to Tupac. They're listening to Public Enemy. Groups that might be old for you guys, but those kids are listening to that. You know why? Because they want content. And a lot of hip hop we have today, there is no content. It talks about the B word, the N word, money, money, money. There's no content. Or maybe it's recycling itself, right? That's what we always say. So anyway, back to France. I leave, and hip-hop starts to develop in the mid-'80s in France. How did it get to France? It got to France through military bases in Germany. You guys familiar after World War II, right? The U.S. set up military bases in Germany. So a lot of the soldiers, African Americans and Latinos that were sent over to Germany. So their brothers, their sisters, their cousins are sending them tapes. Back then we had a thing called cassette tapes. They're starting to get popular again. Anybody got a tape deck? I knew that. So that's how you'd share music. We'd have tapes. We'd make dubs. We'd copy the tape and we'd send it off or we'd give it to somebody. Hip hop traveled to Germany through the tapes, right? And some of them would come back. They would see what's happening. And then one movie that really changed the game as far as visuals, and you guys may have seen this. Anybody see Flashdance? Nobody saw Flashdance. They got 1, 2, 3. Okay. You got to see Flashdance too. You better start putting out a list of movies you all need to see. Because I'm going to give you a list of hip-hop movies that you have to see so you can understand how it became what it is today. So, cassette tapes, traveling, the movie Flashdance, there's an 11-minute scene where it's the first time the world sees breakdancing. Everybody familiar with breakdancing, yes? Okay, all right, cool. So this first time we see breakdancing in the world. The whole world's like, oh, what are these guys doing? What is this? So they start to slowly see that there's this whole street dance culture that's developed. But nobody knows about DJs, nobody knows about graffiti, nobody knows about rap yet, because not much of that is happening, right? Anybody see the Get Down series? Okay, so for those who didn't see, you guys see that series too if you're interested in culture. Why I'd say out of all the series made in Hollywood, it's probably the most accurate one as far as the history of the culture. Okay, and that's always keep in mind because a lot of the kids, even the artists that are up there today, they don't know the history. I'd be pressed to talk to Young Thug or 21 Savage and see how much of the past they know, where this all started. So France takes a little time to develop, but I'm here. So I start to develop, I start to discover, the culture. And when we talk about hip hop, we talk about 4 different disciplines as you go, right? We have graffiti art, then we have DJing, and then we have breakdancing, and then we have MCing or rap. Those are the 4 disciplines that some people would say are subcultures. Some people say it's all together. Graffiti started in the late 60s in Philadelphia by a gentleman named Cornbread who started writing his name everywhere on the wall. And that slowly got to New York, got to tri-state area, and boom, graffiti started. And then we have what we have is subway trains like this. So if anybody is interested in this kind of, this is a photographer named Martha Cooper, very famous. This is the Bronx, right, 1980. And if you can imagine that, whole subway cars were painted like this. I'd love to see that again, but the MTA, the New York City authorities don't want that. But before I go into this and really dig, anybody from NYC here? We got any New Yorkers? Okay, so that's the first step. We got anybody from the Bronx? Oh, okay, all right, 1, 2, all right. BX is in the house, boogie down. Okay, so that's the first question. So if you've never been to the Bronx, for those who's never been, right? Has anybody had any clue what the Bronx looked like 30 years ago? Guys who, maybe your parents, yeah? Go ahead.
I do know, like in the late 70s, early 70s wise, South Bronx was like a rundown. Pretty much didn't look like anything else like the other cities look like.
Exactly. It was a war zone, right? It looked like this. Right, luckily, doesn't anymore. But who could think that 40 years ago, the Bronx looked like this? And you're going to be like, but why? Why did it go like this? Well, what happened is that a gentleman by the name Robert Moses, who was urban planner for the city, decided he wanted to build across a highway that is going to cut the Bronx into two separate parts. And what does that do? That kills real estate near where they're building. People leave. It was Jewish, Irish, Italian families. No not many African Americans, not many Latinos, right? So this whole area below we call the South Bronx, right? That's what I just showed you. And why is it run down? Because nobody wants to live there. Property value is worth nothing. So who moves in there? People who don't have that much money. Minorities, right? African Americans, Latinos, some Asians, other countries too. And the South Bronx becomes the South Bronx. And how do you rule when there's no authorities? Gangs. You do your own authority, right? So that's how the gangs of the South Bronx start to like take serious importance, right? And that's why it was a war zone, because even during the day, you'd get robbed. Look at you like, hey, man, you got some money? Boom, rob you. Broad daylight, no problem. If you don't say no, if you say no, they might just kill you. They might just shoot you, stab you, whatever. So that was the Bronx. Not all the Bronx is like that, but it's the South Bronx, which is this, like I said, you know, if you look at it from an aerial view, and all these photos I'm showing you are part of this exhibit that I put together, which explains the whole history of hip hop, but the birth of hip hop is the South Bronx, okay? And amidst all this emptiness, some young people had very creative. They went from nothing to something, right? I mean, who had the idea to put two turntables together? Kool Herc, anybody familiar? Kool Herc? So, anybody who DJs today, whether you are Tisto, Calvin Harris, Afrojack, Steve Aoki, all those electro dudes, you name them all. If there's no Kool Herc, none of that exists. House music doesn't exist, techno doesn't exist. None of that urban electronic music exists without Kool Herc. He put the two turntables together. But what's interesting with Kool Herc, right, who's from the Bronx, and this is the first party he threw, right, 1973. This is the first flyer of what we call the first official hip-hop party, right? And Kool Herc is from Jamaica. Any Caribbeans in the house? Okay. So Kool Herc is Jamaican, right? He's from Yard. And his family moved to the Bronx. And if anybody familiar with, anybody into dance hall music? Right? So dance hall is all about sound system. And who has the biggest sound system? If you could put like 5, 6, 7, 8 woofers together and you could blow that guy across the river, he's there, and you could blow him away, you're the champ, right? It's talking about sound system bringing out sound. And that's what Kool Herc did from his past experiences back home in Jamaica. He brought out the sound system on the street. This is an indoor party, but he was one of the first ones to do what we call. Absolutely. Sedgwick is in the Bronx. And let me see if I find it. There you go. Block parties. So back in the day, we didn't have a system. We didn't have a beat pill. None of that. You bring out your system. If you look, man, there's a lot of things happening in this picture. A lot happening. So Kool Herc started doing that. So he'd bring out his sound system, and the guys 2 blocks away was like, oh, he's doing that. I'm going to do that same thing. And they would battle blocks. And then DJs started to get famous. Those who saw Get Down, they basically explain that. How Herc got famous. And then a gentleman by the name Grandmaster Flash comes around. And he's very technical. And then you know the other guy who has a crazy record selection who plays Tibetan monk music with James Brown. That's Bambaataa, creator of the Zulu Nation. So those 3 guys, there's of course plenty others, become stars in the Bronx. And block parties. That's how the whole DJ culture, right, of having 2 turntables, a mixer. Anybody can tell me why you would have 2 turntables, not just one?
So to have 2 turntables, say like one is for one song and one's for another song, and if you want to just switch to one song and instantly, without having like a little break in it.
Exactly. That's the key to 2 turntables, is no pause. So when you're dancing, you're like, hey, you're not like, oh, okay. You know, it's continuous. And that's the genius of putting 2 turntables together. But what you also got to think about is that they put those 2 turntables together, and the use of the 2 turntables was key because when these DJs played, the key to your set was to find a record that no one else has ever played before, right? A funk record, like something danceable, right? I'm not talking about finding some, organic music from, I don't know, from like Bangladesh. No, I'm talking about finding something funky that no one's played before. And what you would do is you would have what we call a break part, right? In very famous James Brown, it's called Funky Drummer. Funky Drummer, he has the drummer doing a solo. Just the drummer. So what the DJ was looking for is that break. And he would play the same record back and forth. He would just keep playing the same record and go back and forth on his mixing board, right? And that's when, dancers started to come around. Oh, that's the break. They started dancing because that was the moment they could showcase their moves. And that's how you have break dance. You dance during the break of the record. James Brown, Curtis Mayfield, whoever you can name. And you can find some very obscure funk records that have amazing, and you see 5 white boys killing it. You're like, wait a minute, these white boys is killing it. Yes. There was some that could do it, So that's DJing culture. Breakdance culture comes out of that. The MC culture, the rap culture, kind of comes out of that too, right? Because the MC, as the master of ceremony, like this guy, he's not rapping. He's just getting people moving. Throw your hands in the air. Make money, money. Boogie down Bronx in the house. He's just entertaining. The rap thing took time to develop. It wasn't at all planned that these guys start writing lyrics, right? This evolved, right? And graffiti also evolved, but graffiti evolved, I think, as its own thing. There was graffiti writers dancing, doing DJs. Some old school guys will say, graffiti's not part of hip hop. I say, well, there's one guy who can change everything that's just mentioned here. Anybody familiar with DJ K Slay? Hot 97? Okay, so K Slay, his original name is Dez. He used to be a graffiti writer back in the 70s, 80s. And then he turned to rap. And then he turned to DJing, and he's still DJing and very, very, very popular today. Okay, so he's a great example of somebody who's pretty much been through many of the phases of the culture. So, with that said, I was just giving you a background, right, of the 4 cultures. So as I'll go, I can do, what I was going to do is just show you also a little excerpts, and then we'll go through photos of the exhibit, some of the major pieces. But you might say, well, how did you get interested in all this? How did you come about to be an artist? Well, when I started Purchase with Paul back in '92, I had kind of started a rap group in France. So my thing that I was hoping was going to change it up, and it did for some people, was that I could rap in French. And back in '92, nobody ever heard that before. They're like, wait a minute, you rap in French? Wow, okay. So that was my little thing going. But I was heavily into music. I make music. I make instrumentals, I compose. So that's really what my gig was. But I like to rap too. I was really big into it. So we formed this group called Get Open. And that first year, I had worked on a project with my mom. And you were like, wait a minute, your mom, really? Yeah, my mom put me up into hip hop. She introduced me to hip hop music when I was 11 years old. She took me to a show, and very, very life-changing, I would say. If I could find a photo, life-changing, here it is. New York City Rap, right? And this show gathered Rocksteady Crew, the most famous breakdance crew, Fab Five Freddy, who was a rapper at the time, African Bambaataa, the DJ, Futurist 2000, very famous graffiti writer, so it's Phase, Don D, and DJ DST. So yeah, so basically, to get admitted, living in France with a beat tape was like surreal to me. Like, wait a minute. And I had to call the college to really check. It's like, you guys admitted me? It's like, this is a beat tape, this is hip hop. Yeah, we know. Really? You admit me on a hip hop tape? Yeah, we like your stuff. And I'm gonna do homework and make beats for homework? Yeah. I just couldn't believe it. I believed it until I came back here. So '92, I started college, I'm making beats for homework, and that was crazy. That was just surreal experience. And I heavily got into organizing, putting shows together, as Paul was talking, bringing KRS-One at the time was to some of us was a god, like idol. And so I heavily kept going with it, and then when we left college, graduated, I started working as an intern for Def Jam Records. Anybody familiar with Def Jam? Def Jam is classic hip hop and even new stuff, right? Rihanna's on Def Jam, among others. So basically, I got an internship and I got lucky. And if you think if all aspiring artists in the room, whatever your art is, there's a lot of luck involved in what you do. Being in the right place, right time, meeting the right person. And I got lucky like that because the guy I was working with, anybody familiar with House of Pain? Jump around? Everybody jump, right? So the director of the label I was working for got asked by the lead rapper of House of Pain, named Everlast, to do a solo record. So he was the executive producer, and he turned to me and said, hey, Sibba, you have some music you want to present to Everlast? I was like, me? Really? He's like, yeah, you. What you have? So I played some stuff, and he picked out a couple tracks. And his record ended up selling 3 million. So I did 2 tracks on an album that does 3 million. At the time, we sold records. We didn't stream. No streaming. Streaming makes no money for us. 47,000 plays to get 1 cent. Realize that. It takes 47,000 plays for me to get 1 penny in my pocket. So that's to tell you, streaming does not pay any bills. You could beat all the streaming records you want. Happy made He made 27,000 on 40 million streams. $27,000. Anyway, that's sad stuff. So yeah, back then we sold records. You can live as an artist not being on the road. Because nowadays, as a musician, if you're hitting the road, you ain't making no money. You're broke. You're doing something else. You have a day job. All right? I got a day job, ain't nothing wrong with that. But music is a lot of, art is a lot of up, down, unless you're super lucky. Super lucky, you made a one shot, boom, jackpot, ding, lotto. So I got lucky. I was there, I got lucky, the record sold very well, and that enabled me to do a lot of things. Opened up a lot of avenues, the doors to doing this. But I was interested also in developing my craft. And I decided not to only do hip hop, I opened it up to acoustic music. Because I started as a drummer. So I say I gotta go back to some acoustic. And back then hip hop, there was no acoustic. The Roots were the only group. We had with our group Get Open, we had live band, and then we saw the Roots. That started about 10 years ago that all these hip hop artists play with live band now because they realize that on stage it's more fun for you. It's like you don't want to see, a guy holding his crotch and for 2 hours. We were okay with that back then, but 30 years later, you're like, come on, man, do something else and just jumping around. A lot of these young artists, they have a lot of work to do. I'll just be real honest. Not just on content, but showmanship is none, So, after this great record, a lot of things happened, and last year I got offered through a common friend, hey, you want to curate an exhibit? What? Me? Curate? I've never done that before. Yeah, but you organize, you know people, you know. And before we started college, it also helped me get to this, is I wrote this book. I was just a freshman. Any freshmen here? Okay, so all you freshmen, I started at your age, I had this in hand. I had worked on this. I kind of cheated, I did three years in France before coming to the US. So I studied, but I was able, with my mother, to put this book out. Only interviews, all the hip hop people you could think about at the time are interviewed here, including KRS-One, but many others, and many dancers, DJs, and international artists, which really was a key, right? I don't know how many people here, who listens to hip hop in the room? About, just in general. Okay, who listens to hip hop in another language? Okay, in what language? Spanish? Spanish? Dutch. Okay, my man right there, okay. See? So that's what becomes also interesting because like I said, this culture has invaded the entire planet. And people don't like it, fine, but you can't deny it, right? So let me go through a little bit of the introduction, but before I go to the photos, and I won't go too long on the photos because I want to talk to you guys about all this, but I want to show you excerpts so we can start where the Bronx is. Okay, should we turn off the lights? Turn off the lights.
The city was on the edge of bankruptcy.
The Bronx was like a world of its own.
In the early 70s, man, crime was like the major income of the Bronx.
There were gangs literally in every corner. The violence was everywhere. You could feel the tension in the air. You could see the fights across the street. You could hear the shouts in the nighttime.
The South Bronx, Fort Apache was out of control. They were running through the streets, they were burning everything. I mean, pandemonium hit.
We lost a member that they viciously murdered him out there in the street. Now it's an eye for an eye.
The Bronx was going to be bathed in blood.
How rumors spread, there was not a gang in the whole of New York that was not aware of what's happening.
It's like the movie The Warriors when the ladies on the radio talking about, hey, boppers, you know, you got to make that move.
Let's get down to it, boppers. We're gonna have to do better out there.
Peace after the treaty came instantaneous.
President Young Sinners, Vice President the Young Sinners, Vice President Young Saints.
When we gang busted, we stood in the same area. Now we are able to go here, go there, meet more people, unite with people.
Here's where the whole thing started to change. Little by little, that's when the music started to come into the deal.
All hip-hop came from gang culture.
Herc started something his enemies didn't want to stop. It came in the form of music.
It was more like challenging to dance now and not to fight.
You know, we made a way to have fun, and we made a way to feel like we counted, and we made a way to show the world that we actually existed.
All right, so that gives you guys, for those who not familiar, what the South Bronx was dealing with. Basically, that documentary also was done by alumni of Purchase, Rubble Kings. I heavily recommend it. It's a documentary. It was co-produced by Jim Carrey, the famous comic actor. So yeah, I heavily recommend Rubble Kings. It gives you real good history, what the South Bronx looked like, what really was going on with the whole gang culture. And like I say, you know, that leads to hip hop. Why? You're gonna say. Does anybody know why that would lead to hip hop? Why it would lead to what happened culturally speaking and creatively speaking? Yes? Rap battles. Rap battles. But even before rap battles, graffiti battles, right? These kids would be fighting, not directly, unless they ran into each other in the yard, but they'd be fighting to get that space on the train, right? Or on the wall. The battle was happening on the walls or on the trains. So the word battle is definitely it. DJing, battles. Breakdancing was really the first one. Battles. And they became peaceful battles. Before they were shooting, fighting, right? And now it's not we're fighting anymore, we're battling with our art. Showing, yeah, I could do that. I could spin 50 times around in my head. You can only do 20. And that became the battle. There would be some fights occasionally, but those were the younger brothers, the younger cousins of those folks that you just saw. And they were tired of the violence. We don't want to fight anymore. Why? Got fight, this, it's too much. I could die next, my mom, my brother, you know, my sister, whoever else. So they got tired, the kids, and they said, you know what, we're gonna piece this out. So it's a lot of the younger brothers and the sisters that calmed it down, and hip hop starts as a culture, right? So, Block Party, as I talked, showed you the map of the Cross Bronx, this aerial view. You can see Yankee Stadium right here, right? Yankee Stadium was built in 1923, right? So you can see that the Bronx is being built, right? Bronx is a very young borough, right? So this is the Bronx, as we were talking earlier. This is a great photographer. If you're into, you know, any street stuff and street scenes, this gentleman is British, a gentleman named Stephen Shames, who did, anybody familiar with the Black Panther Party? Political movement, 60s? So he did one of the greatest books on the Black Panther Party, Stephen Shames. And he did this BBC documentary series, photos essay. And I just think this is one of my favorite pictures. We have over 300 photos in the show. This is one of my favorite because of how this is very poetic if you look at it. And I'm not into, you know, looking into art and being very into depth with stuff like that. But if you look at this picture, there's a lot going on, right? You got this cat right here. She's trying to convince him not to go shoot him. She's about to go shoot somebody. He's like, come on, boy, don't go shoot him. And they're like, we don't care what's going on in the world. It could be an atomic bomb, no problem. And then Shorty is filming with his cardboard box. So he's documenting what's happening. This is the South Bronx in 1977. So this kind of shows you the vibe, right? What was going on. When you go to that same block right now in the Bronx, it's so different, you know? So this is the culmination of what that gentleman was just talking in the excerpt. The big gang meeting after one of the lead gangs lost their leader, and they decided instead of being a bloodbath, this is in 1973, the gang truce in the Bronx. And this is a key moment, or else things would have continued to be violent. But things kind of calmed down a little bit. So this I've shown you earlier. This is Dondi, one of the most famous graffiti writers at the time. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Now, how long do you guys think this takes to do this kind of thing? Anybody have any clue? Has anybody spray painted before? It's okay, you can tell them. Paul won't say anything. A little bit? No? Nobody went tagging before? You can do it in your backyard. I'm not saying go to City Hall and tag it up. So no one has a clue. Anyone guess? An hour. He's by himself. This is one person. You guys know how long a subway car is? It's pretty long, right?
Man, I'd say that would take at least like me or someone like that a month.
A month, okay. Yeah. So it takes about 6 to 8 hours. 6 hours to do something like that. 6 hours. So you got to think also about the environment that you're in doing this. It's not like, oh, maybe I'll put a little pink. No. You're in a subway yard, right? It's 1970s. There's what we call the work bums. New York City Transit Police. They're looking for guys like me who's going to, right? So you got that. It's dark. You're not doing this broad day like, hey. No, it's illegal. You get caught, you're going to jail, and you're going to have a $30,000 fine. These kids can't pay that. Nobody making that kind of money, right? So you're in the yard. It's nighttime. It's dangerous. And you don't have that much room because these yards, you have about 6 feet from one train to the other. So you have a little passageway, right, for the workers. It's not made for a painter. Can I get a little more space? No. So he's basically painting this with very little perspective, right? So this takes 6 hours and about 40 cans of spray paint. Now, do you think this gentleman, young guy, 18 years old from the Bronx, has the money to buy 40 cans of paint? You guys know, right? A can of paint costs $6, $7. So times that by 40, that's $300. $300 in 1980 is a lot of money, especially for a young man from the BX who's just, painting trains. So how did they get their paint? They rack it, as we used to call it. Steal. You go into the hardware store. Can I get a couple of those? Oh, I don't need any help. Boom. Oh, you put them in your jacket, put them in your pants. They'd find any way, and they would go paint. Right? So this takes about 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours. If you're by yourself, a few people, it takes less time. The famous NYPD. And you see what the used subway cars used to look like? All tagged up. And then this is the famous visit by who would become the president? Gentleman by the name of Ronald Reagan. Showed up in the Bronx, saying he was going to change things, trying to get a couple votes. That didn't really work out for him. This is the Olympic Games in the South Bronx. Right, find something to do, right? Got nothing, there's no gym, the playgrounds are shot up, taken over by drug dealers, prostitution. So you find a couple mattresses, you find a couple logs of wood, and we jumping. High jump. That we saw earlier, first party. These are as we continue, block parties. This is a very famous photographer named Henry Chalfant. If anybody's interested, Subway Art is a book you should get if you're interested in graffiti art. And then we get the breakdance. So this is a photo by Martha Cooper, and a lot of the breakdance has influence in, let's see. There we go. Am I familiar with Soul Train? Yeah? So breakdance got a lot of its stuff from there.
I said the hip hop, the hip it, the hip it to the hip hop. You don't stop the rocker to the bang bang boogie. Say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat. Now what you hear is not a test. I'm rapping to the beat, and me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet. You see, I am Wonder Mike, and I like to say hello. Up to the black, to the white, the red, and the brown, and the purple, and yellow. But first, I gotta bang, bang, the boogie to the boogie. Say up, jump the boogie to the bang, bang, boogie. Let's rock. You don't stop, rock the rhythm that'll make your body rock. Well, so far you've heard my voice, but I brought two friends along. And next on the mic is my man Hank. Come on, Hank, sing that song.
Check it out, I'm the CASN, the OVA, and the rest is FLY. You see, I go by the code of the doctor of the mix, and these reasons I'll tell you why. You see, I'm 6 foot.
So that's one of the TV show back in the 70s, 80s, very famous, Soul Train. Have a Soul Train Award still exists. So that was a big influence on the dancing, right? Breakdancing, which is influenced by many things, among, some of the stuff that we saw on Soul Train. So that's the whole breakdance aspect, photos. And then, so that gentleman here that you see, that's Dondi. That's the artist we saw earlier with the train. And this is a very important moment in hip hop because here, anybody familiar with Basquiat, the artist? Yeah, a couple people? Okay. So Basquiat is seen here. We'll see him in other photos, but what happens is that there's a gentleman by the name of Fab Five Freddy who also hosted a very famous hip-hop TV show called Yo MTV Raps, which brought hip-hop videos to the world. And he was very connected in the Bronx, but he was also connected downtown in Soho. He was friends with Basquiat, but he was also friends with Andy Warhol. Familiar with Warhol, right? Warhol, but also Keith Haring. He's also another street artist, right? So Dondi became friends with those guys. And what happened is he brought a couple of his friends. Another gentleman, we'll see a piece named Futura 2000. Another gentleman by the name of Lee. And those graffiti writers went downtown to Soho. And they met all those guys that were in the contemporary art world. And that opened up graffiti to the contemporary art world. Very key moment. This is Futura's work. He was very ahead of his time. If you just turn on the light, Paul, just for a second, so you can see this a little bit better. So yeah, I think this is 1980. Graffiti, nobody was doing anything like that at the time. Oh, we're cool. Very abstract. There's Warhol, Keith Haring. This is a Basquiat piece that we exhibited in Marseille. And then we go back to the old school. And these are flyers, right? When you do hip-hop parties, this is, nowadays you get a Facebook invite or Instagram, right? Well, back in time, we used to take the time, put it together, get it printed, get a copy, then hand them out, right? So that's how the first parties were going on. Think about this, right? 1981, $6 to get in a party. Today, man, $6, you get a bagel and coffee. So now we go back to France, and this is what French hip-hop looked like in the early 80s. They were emulating what was happening in the US, dressing the same. They would come to New York to get gear. You couldn't find sneakers. Today it's worldwide. But when we were younger, you couldn't find a really cool pair of Nikes and Adidas in Paris. No. We couldn't find what you had here. And it was 3 times the price when we'd find it. So we'd come to New York and we get gear, right? This is the oldest DJ in France, named D Nasty. He did the same thing as Cool Herc, but in Paris. Brought out the system in the yard. This is another French artist by the name of Locust, who was also very ahead of his time. These are what the Paris projects look like in the suburbs of Paris, because in Paris, you know, a lot of people don't know this about France, and you're like, oh, you think of oui, and the beret, and the baguette, and the cheese, and the wine, you know, Paris is so romantic. But, let me tell you, outside of Paris, the suburbs is no joke. France has the highest immigrant population out of any country in Europe because of colonization. In Africa, North Africa with the Arab world, that's why there's so many terrorist attacks in France, because we have the biggest Arabic population, North African, out of any country in Europe, right? We have the biggest African from West African colonization out of any country in Europe. So when you think about that and the policies of the country, that's why there's so much in London as well, right? Because they're the second country with the second biggest immigrant populations, right? So a lot of people, when they come to France, oh, Paris, oui, oui, da, 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 they got all these cliches, but let me take you to the hood. You will change your mind. Oh, Paris? Oh, that's what it looks like? Really? Yeah, we got hood like that. With people with color, yeah, a lot of them. And here we don't show you that. You show you the, like I said, Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, it's all cool, and cheese and berets and baguettes. But no, there's a huge population. That's why hip hop got so big in France. The second market in the world after the US. And I'm gonna let you hear what it sounds like if you never heard it before. And you might be like, wait a minute, wow, these guys are serious. So, before I play anything, just continue. This is happening in France in 1985. Anybody know these guys? Run DMC, baby. Very, very famous. They're the first, I say, star rap group to set it off, really. Then the other gentleman follows named LL Cool J, who's on TV now. So this is very amazing shot by a photographer named Ricky Powell, who's very friendly with these guys. But this is Russell Simmons. If you know him today, he's a big yogi now. But he started Def Jam Records. He's multi-millionaire. And this is Beastie Boys, right? Two of the Beastie Boys and Run DMC. So this is their tour in France. In the middle, that's Jam Master Jay, the DJ of the Run DMC, who passed, I think, about 5-6 years ago today. And then we move on. So 1985, you have Run DMC, but then this guy right here becomes the game changer. If you're at all into hip hop, anybody like Kendrick Lamar here? So if you like Kendrick and you don't know who Rakim is, you have to do your homework. Please do it. You will discover and say, okay, this presenter wasn't talking doo-doo. He knows. Rakim comes in 1986, changes the rap game. They used to rap 1, 2, 3. I'm in a place we to be. No. That was very, very basic rap. This guy comes out and changes the entire rap game. Key moment, Rakim. Another key moment, Big Daddy Kane at the same time. And then we go back into politics because all this has political influences. This is what I was talking to you about, the Black Panther Party. And then the Last Poets. So on that note, the Last Poets were really a group that influenced rap. And I'll play something for you right now and you can tell me what you think.
Selfish desires are burning like fires among those who hoard the gold as they continue to keep the people asleep and the truth from being told. Racism and greed keep the people in need from getting what's rightfully theirs. cheating, stealing, and double dealing as they exploit the people's fears. And now Dow Jones owns the people's homes and all the surrounding land, buying and selling their humble dwelling in the name of the master plan. Cause paper money is like a bee without honey, with no stinger to back him up. And those who stole the people's gold are definitely corrupt.
So you guys see the similarities, yeah? This is 1977, right before the song we heard in Soul Train, Rapper's Delight, right, which is considered the first rap record. So you have The Last Poets, but then you have another guy who no one ever talked about named Pigmeat Markham, who was more like he was more like a talker. But listen to this introduction.
Yeah, he, this court is now in session. His Honor, Judge Pigmeat Markham presiding. Yeah, he, the coat of swings is just about ready to do that thing. I don't want no tears, I don't want no lies. Above all, I don't want no alibis. This judge is hip, and that ain't all. He'll give you time if you're big or small. Fall in line or this coat is neat. Peace, brother.
Uh-oh, here come the judge. Here come the judge. Everybody know that he is the judge.
So you hear these various influences on rap. So this is going back 68, then you have late 60s as well, James Brown, very famous. And then direct influence, Public Enemy. Anybody familiar with Public Enemy? Okay, cool. And then we go back, NWA. Everybody saw the movie, Straight Outta Compton? Okay, cool. So that's a good movie because while this was happening in the East Coast, Public Enemy was very politically enthused. The West Coast answers, and we have NWA answers in a different style, but very musically very close to what Public Enemy was doing. It's soundtrack of the streets, as we used to call it. And then rap is happening in France, and again, very, very, very popular. So let me show you a Paris group by the name of NTM, and I won't translate what it means because it's very, very dirty. I'd be ashamed to translate it. So it's just to show you what French hip-hop looks like in I'd say this is like mid-90s.
Vous avez trop chaud ou quoi?
Ok. Non, vas-y. On va calmer l'atmosphère. Prochain saumon, il est dédicacé à tous les gens qui étaient là en 92. Il y a donc 6 ans quand on a fait le premier Zénith. Je sais qu'il y en a encore qui sont là. Dédicacé à tous les gens de 95 qui étaient là au Zénith. Dédicacé à tous les gens qui nous supportent depuis le début. À tous mes proches de Saint-Denis, la Kip elle est là, DJ James c'est quand tu veux. Merci, Kodats ma pips, yo. Saddam, Zola, yeah, Karimbo, Karim Scanner, la divine, yeah, toi-même tu sais. Elles font qui chose, yeah,
Big shot, baby.
Pourquoi c'est là, tout ça.
Tout le monde.
Je t'explique tout ce que je kiffe, c'est de fumer des spliffs et puis de construire des riffs qui soient compétitifs. Pouvoir faire de la musique tout en gardant mon éthique. Faire du fric sans jamais tâcher l'image de ma clé. C'est fou mais c'est comme ça, je me nourris de ça. J'ai besoin de ça, mon équilibre dépend de ça. J'suis sur le mic, le mec et puis j'aime ça. J'aime quand ça fait pas, quand ça vient d'en bas et puis quand on sait pas. Pour filer léché, trop sophistiqué c'est péché. Je préfère m'approcher la vérité sans tricher, sans jamais changer mon fusil d'épaule. Et puis garder mon rôle, tenir la tôle, rester en pole position. Peu confortable mais c'est pas grave, j'aime le challenge. Porter le maillot, frapper du saut de ceux qui dérangent est un honneur pour moi. Comme pour tous mes complices, mes compères, mes compasses. Fatigué de cette farce, on veut plus subir et continuer à jouer les spires. Sache que ce à quoi j'aspire, c'est que les miens respirent, c'est
So yeah, then so the exhibit kind of ends in early 90s. So we kind of, went from South Bronx, and then you start to go towards the end. Everybody know Tupac, I'm sure. with the whole beef that was created by Suge Knight, West Coast, who was the manager of Dr. Dre. Everybody familiar with that story? The whole death row thing with Bad Boy, Puff Daddy? Okay, so East Coast, West Coast, two moguls who have absolutely no talent are beefing and basically get these two guys killed. That's basically how I break it down. They're both responsible. Those guys, both of those guys should be, well, one of them is already in jail for tax fraud. But he did run over, but they caught him for some tax evasion thing, so that too. Yeah, he ran some guy over who he said stole some money from him. He's a football player and a gang member, gangbanger. So yeah, no, Puff Daddy should be in jail as well for Biggie's death. There's other, I mean, this guy has at least 15 bodies on his shoulders. When you guys weren't even born. But even before that, before Bad Boy existed, there was a big accident at City College University up in Harlem. There was a celebrity basketball game, and Puffy was organizing. Didn't bring enough security. There was like a panic moment. People started exiting. There was a stampede. 12 kids died. City College never had a hip-hop event since. This is like 97. Never, ever since they had because of that. So he has 12 bodies that he refused to give or to do something for the families.
Wait, why were they all trying to leave though?
I don't know. There was some stampede. There was some situation. I mean, whatever the story was. He organized. You organize, whatever happens, you're responsible. So, I don't know. That's a whole other story. I don't want to focus on negative folks. So, B.I.G., if you're not familiar with all of B.I.G.'s music, you got to. Right? Before Jay-Z, there's B.I.G. Right? Before Kendrick, there's Jay, there's Eminem. Nas, of course. I mean, there's this exhibit, like, that's what I got. A lot of criticism. You say, oh, but we don't have this guy. You don't have that guy. You know how many people I would have loved to put in this exhibit, but I had limited space. Okay, when you put an exhibit together and I had no clue, you're like looking, what am I going to put on these walls? But I have a director above me, so I got to, hey, man, what do you think about that? So there's a lot of stuff that I really wanted to include that I just couldn't, like Mobb Deep, very important group to me, So here we're pretty much at the end. This is a very famous photographer. If you're into fashion at all, not just hip hop, but if you're just in fashion, very great pictures by Jamel Shabazz. Very famous photographer who did only hip hop fashion photos. He would just catch dudes on the street. Ladies, let me take a picture of you. Bop, bop, bop. And he would just, document that. And Salt and Pepper, right? Right now, the MoMA has an exhibit about fashion. And these jackets have been shown. They were made like illegally by a gentleman by the name of Dapper Dan. And Dapper Dan would get, Gucci, like a bag, he would cut it up and he would stick it on some leather. And he would make these jackets that were worth $3,000 back then. And the rappers, LL Cool J helped make them famous. And then this is Fab Five Freddy I was talking about. This is the last picture. And this is really the influence of fashion in hip hop. I don't know where that young lady is, but I saw somebody walking in with, right now, what's super popular with ladies is they're wearing slippers with fur, with gold on it, with little trimmings, all kinds of stuff. I saw somebody, I'm not going to point you out because I don't remember, but somebody walked in with those here. And what you got to realize is that you guys start to wear it in this country, all the other girls in the world are looking at you, what you're wearing. And I was in France, and I was like 2 months ago, and I watched ladies in Marseille wearing chancletas with fur on them. And I'm like, what's going on? That's hood stuff. You guys don't know? That's in the hood you do that. And you guys are wearing it like it's a fashion statement. It's all cool, right? It's the same thing like do-rags. You kids, they don't know it. You go to France, they're wearing do-rags like it's fashion. It's like, this is like, you wear a do-rag to hold your hair down so you don't have to do it the next day. There's all kinds of cultural attachments. And people in this country don't realize that. You put your pants down to your knees. They're all doing that over there now. They don't know that was a jail situation. You guys all know about the whole jail thing that was putting your pants down below your butt? What that meant? That means you're looking for action. Yeah, so you walking down that subway with your, like, what are you doing, man? So, fashion, I mean, they make pants in Europe that fit right below your butt because kids want that right now. So, the influence of hip hop style has influenced the fashion world worldwide. You know, designer wear, Louis Vuitton, all of them. I mean, this is watch TV. I was watching Target commercial, Honda commercial. No, Target, the new Target, Janelle Monáe, is an old Bismarck song. Say he's just a friend, oh baby you. That song was made famous by Bismarck, old school, in '87. So, whether you like it or not, hip hop, complete takeover. And 40 years later, I got lucky and I was able to put an exhibit together. I never thought I would do something like that, really honestly. So, if you're into this in this world, don't ever underestimate yourself, but also don't ever think that something's not possible, right? Like, I never aspired to do this, but this was fun. To call like 15, 20 different artists, hey man, can I this, that, oh, I'll pay you X amount, da da da. I was negotiating, really. Although it's not that much fun, but dealing with a lot of creative people. And that's what's the fun part of it, is dealing with creative people. So on that note, that's about it. Let's see, anything I didn't cover? I think I got everything. Yeah. I didn't play as much music as I'd like to, but you know, it's okay. Any some questions?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, of course.
So my question to you is, were you a part of the Get Down show? Like, I know Nas had a part to do with the whole show and everything like that. Were you able to be a part of that as far as like hip hop culture?
No, it's funny you say that, because when I saw that the series ended, I said, man, I think I could continue if they were, you know,
There's
they were saying,
too.
supposedly.
There is on, I believe, Netflix.
Okay.
I never got to see it.
Okay, because they ended production because the guy who directed it got a deal with Sony to make 4 feature movies. So he said, oh, forget this, I'm going to Sony. So they stopped the series, which was the most popular series on Netflix firstly, but the most money they spent on any series so far. So it was, I said, man, maybe I should call Netflix. Like, hey, you know, I just did this exhibit. You need somebody to help and write the next part or help be part of it? Because I'd love to do it, you know, like.
I mean, as far as history goes, when I saw that show, it was just such an eye-opener.
Yeah.
That I'm from New York too, so it was like, wow, like you never thought that this is where hip-hop evolved from, and now you look at it.
Oh, absolutely, and it's very accurate. That's what I really liked about it, is that the depiction is pretty accurate to exactly what happened.
Literally.
Yeah,
And
because
the way they dress, everything.
yeah,
culture-wise.
yeah. And they really did a great job. I think that's. I was reluctant. I was very reluctant. I'll be honest. At first, I was like, no, I'm not gonna see this. I'm gonna be disappointed. They're gonna do this. But then one of my group members, like, come on, you gotta watch it. Just go through the first one, you'll be okay after. And it was true. After number 2, I was in. I was like, got me. Yeah.
You guys have a question?
As an artist, so besides with your work over here, as well as coming to here and talking to us, do you do any other type of works to help out young artists who are trying to?
Well, what I actually did 7 years ago is I created a foundation with a friend of mine called Hip Hop Loves Foundation, and the goal was to go to work with young people and teach them via hip hop and different disciplines, teach them, well, just inspire them. It wasn't really teaching. Inspire. If there's teaching to be done, great. So we worked heavily, very closely with the Harlem Children's Zone, which is one of the biggest nonprofits in the country, which is about 20 different sites in Harlem. They're like multi-million dollar of, investments from hedge funds to create these different centers for young African Americans and Latinos, to get inspired, empowered, So the foundation is not really active anymore, but I did a lot of that stuff for like 6 years straight. I would go maybe once, even twice a week, and I would do music production introduction. then I would just do kind of talks like that. But they were younger, so tougher to get their attention. They were like, you know, but young teenagers, so it's a little, all the guys interested in girls and girls interested in guys. Because this is after school program. But Harlem Children's Zone is very interesting because they come, they attend a class, and they get paid. It's a system that the hedge funds, they fund this system. It's like you go to class, you get a credit. So for each credit you do in a week, at the end of the week, you get a little paycheck. So it's kind of like an incentive for these kids to go to these programs, which are stay out of trouble, go to these programs, learn something, maybe, you know, or get inspired by somebody, someone, something. So they go there, so the incentives, they can make a little money, have their little paycheck. After 2 weeks, they go to check cashing, you know, and they feel a little empowered, I did this, and they got a little money in their pocket. So yes, I've done some stuff. I love doing work with young people. If I can share, I will. You know, it's like super important for me. Because when we were coming up, that's what a lot of people did for us. We didn't have the internet to get all the information on your own. Today, you don't need to ask any questions if you don't want to, right? Just go. You just sit here and go back and forth with Google. You know, Google don't talk. It's even better, right? No response. So, like back in the days, like that's how we shared. You got to pass it on. You talk. Hey, you know, what are you trying to do? Is you trying to make music, or you trying to do this? Okay, what kind of equipment are you working with? You know, oh, you working that equipment? Okay, well, you're a drummer. You should try this, or you know, like it's. So yeah, definitely love to do that.
Where is this located?
This is in the south of France. It's on the Riviera. You know where Saint-Tropez is? You've heard of the name Saint-Tropez? So Saint-Tropez, I think, sometimes more famous than Paris. And I sometimes don't understand why, but that's all the story. So this is in the Riviera.
Do you plan on maybe having something like this in New York? The Bronx?
Crossing the fingers. Oh, it would be amazing. I mean, and that's what I've had meetings with some museum folks, and after doing the research, there's never been an exhibit on the culture as a whole in New York City, where it's from. Never.
Then that would be dope.
There's been a graffiti exhibit. There's been a DJ event. There's been photography and hip hop. There's been all the different solo shows of so-and-so and that person. But bringing the entire culture, because if you look here, what we have here, that's why I want to make it interactive. We have vinyl. These are all covers of records. And here we have video stations. So some of the videos I showed, you can watch there. Here we have an audio station. So you can listen to some of the music that's being portrayed in these photos. So there's never been an exhibit like that in the city before.
That picture is like so capturing because he has like a fan on one of the metal.
That's great. I mean, exactly. All right, fellas. It's a hot day today, but if it's hot, but also what's really, so you look at this guy, the DJ, he's hurt. He still came out. That's it. He still came out. I was like, man, I'm missing this one. Yeah.
Where in the Bronx was it?
Oof. This is I really couldn't tell you. I would have to ask the photographer. But yeah, this is all South Bronx. All this stuff is all South Bronx.
Sorry, I have another question.
No, go ahead, man.
So, when you make music, what type of software do you use?
Well, right now, I used to use. See, when we were in college with Paul, the school first got the first sequencing software, right? For those who don't know, sequencing is just a software that enables you to put different pieces together and play them simultaneously, right? Because before there was no software. You couldn't play a James Brown record and Coltrane together anywhere. There's no way to do that. On 2 records, yeah, simultaneously, but before that we couldn't do that. So with software, you can try, sequencing software. So at Purchase, we had the first sequencing software, and I started with that. Now I'm with Pro Tools, but that's just my final stuff. I work mainly with Machine, Native Instrument, as the Machine is the big drum machine. So I work with that, and then I go into the computer. But back then, we didn't have, I mean, you couldn't afford a computer. Computer cost what, 3,000 for a tower? A laptop was like $4,000. Yeah, it was a big box, you know, like it takes so much room and noisy, like worse than that guy right here. Yeah, it got hotter. You're like, what is going on noise? So, and it was just too expensive. You couldn't make music at home. No way. You have to have money. You know, you have to at least a couple thousand to invest to start. Nowadays, for a couple hundred, if you already have a PC laptop, you can make music. Easy. Well, even no money. Yeah, that's what I do, you know, on the way up. All the apps in here now, it's easy. But back then, you'd keep your ideas in the head, then you hold down ideas or have a recorder so you'd sing your idea. Now you can pull your phone, right? Remember this? Cool. You listen, okay, cool. Right? But back then, you should keep your idea and remember it, because you might not get to the studio right away. It might become 3 days before you get this. What was I thinking of the other day? What was that? You know? So, yeah, native instrument, machine is a cool tool. If you're looking to invest in something, it's cheap, $600. Back then, we couldn't dream of having that something that cheap, you know? So. I gotta do the same.
I was like, wait, 4? I gotta go.
Me too. 304.
I was wondering what your interaction was with the museum specifically, and how the cross between community and pop culture really, or how did the exhibition bring in community, and how did you find it crossing with the art, quote unquote, art seekers, you know, the collectors and
Mhm.
everything? Did you find that it was difficult, or was there any seamless transitions between the two?
Well, to be real honest, I think the exhibit had a chance to not happen. Why? Because France, when we were talking about it, was about to go through elections, just like here, right? And there was a threat that we would have a Agent Orange clone in France. Well, Agent Orange equaling Trump, of course. We would have a similar president, female, Le Pen, very dangerous woman. And the director was scared. That's why he put this on exhibit then, because he was scared that if she passed, if she got in, that he wouldn't get the funding. Because this is a city, the MAC is a city-funded museum. The Louvre, for example, is government-funded. So it's, if you would compare with federal and city, right? The feds fund the national parks, and then, you know, the city funds the local park, right? For whatever. So the way this went down, first of all, he was scared, because Marseille is a very interesting town. 50% Arabic, but the other 50% is black and white, and there's extremely racist folks. There's a huge, strong Italian, but very conservative Italian community, and mafia. Mafia rules Marseille. So hip hop, they couldn't give two about it. And the problem is with community is communication, because the museum has this certain, you know, and the reputation, and a lot of the kids, they don't know where that museum is. It's contemporary art, so that's elite. So I pushed heavily, bring buses, bring the kids. When I'm there, bring me the kids. I will do visits for however many kids you want, no problem. So I did a lot of that. I'm going back in 2 weeks to do more, because there's been a lot of requests, and the museum broke their record. I knew this was going to happen. They do 28,000 in a year. We already passed 25,000, and we're only 6 months into it. The exhibit is 9 months. We're going to break record. I know that. So the city's like, you're going to break records, but you still hate you're not even considering this culture, but your museum is doing numbers like it's never seen before. Never seen before. And people discovering that museum, like, that museum is in our town. Oh, why? Because of this exhibit. Oh yeah. I did a visit about a month ago. There was a family who was sitting there, and I asked the gentleman, I said, "Do you like the exhibit?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I came specifically for that." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, I came from Paris." You know, Paris and Marseille is about 600 miles, so it's not, you don't drive a couple hours. It takes 3 hours on the bullet train. It takes about 8 hours to drive. So he told me he came down with his family just to see the exhibit from Paris. So it's like you going to Miami just to go see an exhibit. So you're the curator. You're like, that feels good. That feels really good. And he came with his whole family. He's like, "Yeah, I lived this. I want my kids to discover what I was living." I was like, okay, that's cool. I like that. It's nice of you to do that. Yeah, or, I mean, you know, I'm not against trap music, but you just, also knowing the history, you can like what's going on now. I'm nothing against it. You just know a little bit about what it used to be and just the background of it, because, you know, you only grow as a musician. What I think the problem is with a lot of these kids, they're not thinking as musicians. They're not thinking as creative artists. They're thinking money. They say, "Oh, I can make this money. I can get with this girl. I can do this. I can buy a house." But yeah, and then, you know, it's like Cardi B. You know, I got a lot of love for Cardi B, but I don't think in 2 years you're going to hear about her anymore.
Just like younger men.
Yeah, that, you know, it's like, yeah, and then that's it. It's like, young folks, you guys are moving too fast, you know? You guys, from 1 minute to the next, you want something else. We weren't like that, right? We used to take advantage, and we got a CD, you look at it, you look at the liner notes. I think it's, but that's what it is. And, you know, I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, and you guys are the ones to realize this, is that we're heading to this society where you guys are not going to own anything. You guys realize that? You're not going to own anything. Like, for example, you're talking about software, right? All the software companies now, you don't own, they just don't send you a CD loader, installer thing no more. No, you download it, but you don't even own the software itself in your download. You know, like if you want to re-download that, you have to go to the site and download it again. You don't have it in your system.
Yeah, but it sucked downloading all that.
I agree.
Like, there's no back in the day thing about it when they sent you the disc and you paid for it and you download, like that sucked. Like,
I agree, but the problem is like not having ownership of anything anymore. Like my music, like all the software I use, like I gotta go online to download stuff. The same thing is happening with music. Look at Spotify. If you got Spotify, any of you two guys have Spotify, you don't own any of that music. If I say to you, we're in the plane, right? And I say, "Hey, can you play that K-Dot track you played for me this afternoon?" You got no Wi-Fi, you can't play that stuff, right? You don't own it. So we're heading to that society where we don't own any. Look at food, right? People will like order Blue Apron and Fresh Direct and this. That's cool if you don't have time, I understand. But it's like you're not going to the store anymore. Amazon's taking over the planet. Oh yeah. You know, so it's like, I'm not against that, but I'm just saying, back in the day when you used to get items, like, go on and put it in your little collection, and then you got 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 CDs, you're like, yeah, it looks good. But nowadays, it's like, I don't own it, I need space. That's it.
I got my first CD player, dumpster diving at Purchase, sophomore year, and dumpster diving because people would leave at the end of the year, they'd throw everything out.
Everything, but things that were still like good. I'm sure you guys go through that too, right?
Yeah, and it's like, look, I have access now. I can
There you go, see, I do too. Hey, you gotta have it.
But before that, I couldn't buy CDs. I didn't have the equipment for it, right? So I think the access to stuff more than ever is just amazing now. You can plug into so many more artists, musicians, movies, everything, and it's take advantage of that. Because I can remember just wanting to always be involved in the arts, but like you said, the startup wasn't the same. You didn't have a couple $100,000. You couldn't start. You couldn't have access to that.
That's it. Yeah, you couldn't even dream of creating.
Yeah.
It's just like in your head. I mean, I just did a recording session three weeks ago with a guy who hadn't been in the studio in 30 years. So he came to my house like if it was 30 years ago. And I'm like, wait a minute. My man came with vinyl. It was like he had his vinyl and he knew exactly what part he wanted. And he said he had heard everything in his head. He knew where it was. But when we got to the machine and putting it actually together, nothing worked. It didn't work together. So he was like, kind of like, what am I gonna do now? And I said to the guys, like, when was the last time did you ever own the machine itself? He's like, no, I never had a sampler. I was like, that's the first thing. He's like, so how did you do the 2 records you did? Oh, it was just in the studio, and we'd bring the stuff, and the engineer would put it together.
Yeah, the engineers do everything.
So nowadays, you know, you do everything from home. Hey, I'm not mad at that though, because the studio time is expensive. It was minimum 100 an hour back in when we were coming up. Who can afford that? Who can afford that?
Quad Studios, I forgot how much you charge, but they charge a lot per hour. My
Yeah.
friend she does like the piano lessons.
Uh-huh.
So.
They a lot of the studios are still alive, charge a lot because that's the only way they survive, and there's so little that they can charge that because they'll have regular clients. Yeah, they have regular clients. But yeah, recording studios going out of style, man. It's like everything's going to happen in the house. So a lot of these guys have their studio in house. Kanye and French Montana and all these guys
I
have.
feel like a lot of artists have studios in their
Yeah,
Ableton
yeah,
studios.
that's what they do now. Everyone did that, yeah. Once the software became cheap and, well, really that you could crack it. Really, that's it. It was downloadable and you can crack, and you didn't have to pay $400, $500, $600 for software. Like, then that's not only it. You got plugins, you got all this other stuff to buy too. So, yeah, pricey.
Thank you so much for sticking around.
Yeah.
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 If you want to, talk.
Yeah, if you guys want to exchange information, Instagram, information,
Yeah, get social
absolutely.
media, right?
Yeah.